My name is Mike King, and in behalf of Esri's public safety team, we welcome you to the April Emergency Communications Solutions webinar titled Sharing Data Effectively and Securely with ArcGIS Enterprise and Hub. I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues who are on this call. Initially, Britt Bromley, who oversees our public safety partner network across the public safety ecosystem. And Britt will be spending some time throughout the webinar, perhaps interjecting with questions and other insights that he feels are important. And also, I want to thank Ray Yamali, our marketing coordinator, who has managed and may from time to time step in with some insight or information. Our presenters today will be Shannon Kaliski. Shannon is a product manager for analytics in the data sciences team at Esri. Prior to coming to Esri, she worked in a few other industries, but most notably for today's webinar, I wanted to make mention of her years of service given to the State of Texas Department of Public Safety, including time spent as the chair of their 911 mobile GIS subcommittee. We'll also hear from Brenda Wolf, who is a senior product manager for ArcGIS Hub at Esri. Brenda works in government, nonprofit, and education, and has been at Esri for more than a dozen years. Prior to coming to Esri, she worked in analytics and large-scale statistical forecasting for the SAS Institute, and also was employed at the state of Montana. And then our final presenter will be Ken Wall, who is the president of Geodata Services in Missoula, Montana. Ken will be talking about some of the amazing work he's been doing with rural public safety agencies as part of their migration toward next generation 911. I think he'll also share some really intriguing insights and lessons learned as he's dealt with this challenge across rural America. Ken's specialties include demographic and economic modeling, training, community planning, and of course, for this call, next generation 911. So in conclusion, I'd just like to express my thanks to this great team of experts who are joining us today. This is a result of the January Focus webinar that we held, and a great deal of interest that was expressed to have more information in this area. So with this, I'd like to turn the time over to my colleagues and Ken, and we'll move forward. So thanks again.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Kaliski. I'm going to jump right in and talk about WebGIS a little bit. So WebGIS, as a lot of you hopefully know, is this idea of having access to your data, information products, whatever resources that you may be using anytime, anywhere, on any device. And the kind of vision behind it is you have all of this different data that you manifest into different products, which may be just serving out the raw data, creating maps, creating apps. New at 10.7 with ArcGIS Enterprise, you can even create hosted Python notebooks. And then you have all of the different users from your organization or beyond coming in and finding what they need. But there's a little bit of a challenge. And the challenge is this is a very, very basic portal homepage, but you can see what do these non-GIS folks do with this? And that's the question that they find themselves asking all of the time, whether they're an executive, whether it's a trooper, whoever it is. When they get to this page, if they've never been here before, and if they weren't involved in adding information to it, it can feel a little intimidating. And for some people, they decide to end their journey right there and not dig any deeper. So now I want to tell you about a new product that we added at ArcGIS Enterprise 10.6.1 called ArcGIS Enterprise Sites. And what this does, it allows you to build tailored web experiences that look and feel modern. So each site can have its own content, its own design, colors, and branding. So every single one can be different. You can have all of your private content leverage. Security is completely upheld. So however you secured it in the portal, that's exactly how it's going to be secured in the site, and you don't have to do anything extra. You can start designing quickly because it has a drag and drop interface, so you don't have to become a web developer. You also don't have to hire a web developer because that can be challenging to get a web developer on board. And even if you can get the web developer on board, sometimes it's a challenge to get them back whenever you need to make an update. So for this reason, you'll see a lot of organizations, they might have a piece of a beautiful web page, but it just falls out of date. And GIS is constantly moving, especially in this realm of 911. Now, if you do happen to know HTML or CSS, you can, of course, bring that to sites as well and really begin to tailor everything from the top navigation to the whole look and feel of the entire experience. And for each site you build, at the same time that you're building that beautiful web page that you plan to access from your desktop computer, you're also building a responsive mobile app. So this means that people who have access to that site could pull it up on the cell phone or their iPad or whatever device they're using and be able to navigate it in a way that is native for that device. So here's some examples of different sites that we've built since we've released it. And you can see there's no rule of how you have to lay these out. They can look totally different, and you can build them for individual projects. You can build them for departments, which we see quite often, different teams, because there's no limit to the number of sites you can create. And you get to control who has access to each of these sites. So that way you can keep the information as completely secure as you want it. So how do these users access this site? Because you already have your portal homepage, but how are they going to learn to get here? Well, one thing you can do is just give them the site URL. They'll navigate to that, and if you have a private site, the site will prompt them for their credentials. They'll enter the credentials you gave them, and as soon as the behind the scenes, the site's application verifies with the portal, which happens in microseconds. They could literally say the word one and it should be done. And then it'll pass them through to the site. Now, if it's a public site, it's even simpler. They just go to the URL and then all of the information is there. The one thing to keep in mind with public sites is it depends on how you build them. ArcGIS Enterprise is designed to be secure. And a little bit later in this presentation, Brenda will take over and show you some really great ways that you can make the most of public sites if that is the audience that you're trying to reach. All right, so let's jump into a quick demonstration. I say quick, but I'm going to take a little more time than that. So here's a portal homepage, and you can see this one has a lot of different information already built out in it. So it's great, but we still have that challenge of how would someone find what they need? I mean, typically what they would do is they would need to navigate to a group, and they see them all listed, and you can start to see where the dilemma is happening. So even if they made it to this group, for example, this one for Philadelphia data, how do they know what they should click on, what they should be looking at first? This experience is the exact same for all of the groups, and that's where some of that challenge comes in. It doesn't provide that tailored experience. It doesn't give all of that contextual richness that you're after. So let's compare that to a site. So here is an ArcGIS Enterprise site where all of the same information from the portal is being delivered through a different experience. When someone comes to this page, they can automatically see where they are. They have access to browse data by a keyword or simply select it based on a category. Scrolling down, you can see that we have the ability to embed apps, or in this case, well, this is an app, but we could have also put a web map. We could have put anything else there. And these are fully interactive, where I could click on it to get additional information. I could pan and zoom and do all of the filters as if I was going to this ops dashboard by itself, except it's in the site. So this cuts down the number of URLs you have to give people, because now it's kind of one-stop shopping. They go to one place and all of the information is there. The story is unfolding itself for your users. And then you can even link to other groups within this. You could also have done this in the top navigation. We'll explore some of these later, but let's take a look at how you would find data. So suppose I came in and I'm looking for some boundary data set. Perfect. I can click on the data and it takes me straight into a pre-filtered view of all of the data that meets this criteria. It's basically like giving you a geospatial search engine at your fingertips, and you didn't have to do anything crazy to do it. Whenever I go in and I start looking at the data a little more closely, you can see that Sites gives me information about what the attributes are, the metadata. I could launch into creating a web map from this, or a story map, or anything else. Now, and you can see it even renders it on the screen for me. Now imagine that I came here and I didn't see the data I was looking for. Maybe I knew I was looking for EMS, but I don't know which one of these EMS is in. Maybe it's in all of them. Then I could browse by keyword, simply typing in EMS and searching. And once again, all of that data that was relevant to EMS shows up right away at my fingertips. I can now go in, explore this data. So if we wanted to take these EMS stations, create a web map, behind the scenes, it's just fluidly communicating with the portal. So it takes them to the right area, draws it on the map for them. Now it really reduced that barrier for someone who wanted to maybe explore more. Now I could easily change the symbology. You can see it already brought up smart mapping. And what I could do is start to bring in my own data. If I was someone who had a CSV file that I wanted to look at alongside this, or if I wanted to browse from the Living Atlas and find demographic information or any of the other data that's available through ArcGIS, I could do it. And I didn't have to know how to navigate the portal. All I did was click on that data. All right, so let's go back to our homepage and let's take a look at how this department gateway that I've created. Sites can link to other sites, and they can also have pages. What I've done here is create pages. So for example, we'll look at this one for the fire department. You can see that the top banner stays the same. It's one cohesive experience. This is because it's a page. Had I created a different site, that could be totally different. I could have a whole different experience there. And here I've done something a little different with the design. I've put popular data sets at the top and then put the dashboard a little further down, where once again I can explore, see important things like turnout, response, and dispatch times, and I can still get into this data. So what does it look like to build a site? Let's take a look. If we go back to our portal, where were we at in the portal? Here we go. We'll go back to the home page. If you are someone who's going to build a site, it's very easy to get started. All you do is go to the app launcher, click on it to open it, select sites, and it's going to take you into the sites manager. Here I can see information on every site that's been added to this portal. Now, this one we use internally for demonstration, so we haven't, and we're just moving it, so we don't have a lot of groups, but you can see how many views have happened for each site. So these basic statistics can really help you out. Now, when you're ready to create a new site, in the top right corner, there's a green button that says Create New Site. Just click on that, and you're in the site creation process. You fill out basic information to give it a name. You can define how you want that URL to look. I could change this base map, which remember when I selected the data and it had that dark gray base map that things were rendering on? That's what this base map controls. And I could choose any of the Esri custom base maps that are available, such as dark gray. I could go to OpenStreetMap or anything else. So if I click next, it'll take me to the next part of the journey of creating this site. Now, a portal has tons of information on it, but how do we narrow that down to make it really fine-tuned for the group that's using it? And the way that you do that is by simply adding the groups of data that you may want. So perhaps I want EMS data, Philadelphia data, some boundary data. Let's just go with those to get started. Now I've basically pre-filtered the information that people will find in this site. If I want to create pages, I can simply go here, type in the name of the page. So maybe I want to create a specific page for my first responders. I can even put a space in here and you can see how it automatically creates the hyphen so that way it's web friendly and exactly how it needs to be. So it was extremely easy to create that page. I did not need to be a web developer by any means. If I go into the site editor, it brings me into this default template. And the default template is a great way for you to start customizing things. So maybe you do want to do some HTML or CSS. Maybe you really like this component, but you just don't know how to customize it and build it from scratch. Here, you can have access to all the HTML and CSS and can customize whatever you want. But my favorite approach when it comes to building sites is simply to start deleting everything and start from scratch. So I'm going to delete all this out of here. Okay, I think that's enough. So the way you start building a site is, one, you have information about the site name. Here I can control the header. This is my header up here. I could change the name. And see that it isn't automatically applied. I could go in and adjust the color. Themes are where you really define the color palette that your site's going to use. It's the first place that everything's going to go really right or really wrong. I don't know what it is about people, myself included. Whenever I sit down and build a site, my first reaction is try to go opposite of all of these. And you end up with lime greens and magentas. So how do you avoid that? The way to avoid it is work with your brand colors already. If you have a logo or a seal, you can get browser add-ons like this one that I have that's a color picker that allows me to search for the colors and automatically get the color codes that I could fill into these boxes. Or your organization may already have a color picker set up for you, or a brand guideline that you could follow. I could even go into Google and access any of their open fonts to change the basic fonts that are shown here. When it comes to building, I can just simply start dragging and dropping these elements into my site to get started. Categories are one of the most popular widgets that we see. And what it basically allows you to do is be able to predefine that filtered group. Remember in the first one I clicked on boundaries. If I wanted to do that again, I would simply use a tag query, make the tag boundaries. We should maybe change this to say boundaries so people know what they're clicking on. And then I can pick an icon. I can choose from a gallery of icons that are already available. Maybe I'll pick this one. Or if I wanted a custom icon, I could upload my own. So that is an option for me as well. And all behind the scenes, it's using the tags in my portal to be able to populate this with information. I'll add another row so I can break this up a little bit. And then I will go ahead and add something different to this. A gallery is another really useful feature. Sorry, I got a cough. Okay, galleries. So the way you can customize a gallery is that you can add anything that you have available. Dashboards, data sets, you can even manually combine a combination of them all. So if I pick data sets and search fire, I can see that when I've added these, it's automatically brought them in. It brought in their thumbnails that I had set in the portal, as well as their summaries and items details. This makes it really easy for me to design and for others to be able to use. So I'll just stop with one more layout option, something that is, it could be very practical. It's definitely something very fun whenever you're showing off a site. A lot of organizations now are interested in the idea of incorporating social media. So imagine that you are tasked with looking at and monitoring these Twitter feeds. So here I have a Twitter account for the Los Angeles Fire Department. All I have to do to incorporate this into my site is select the URL, go back to my site, enter it here, and you can see it's already started coming in. Maybe I want to show a dark theme, and all of these tweets are there. Now, I think this is a little big, so maybe I want to add one more thing to it. We'll show the default charting that's available within sites. I can drag beside the Twitter feed that I've just added, configure this with data. So let's see what data I have. Let's do calls for service. I can select the calls for service. I just want to get a general, let's see, action taken. Oh, this was the wrong calls for service data set. Let's switch that out really quick. We will do this calls for service. And not the address, but the action taken. What's it call type? Response time, postal code. Problem. There we go. So now I see the types of problems that are showing up. And I could also change this to be a bar chart, which that isn't really helping me. If I go to problem, still not the most helpful because there's just so much data. So that pie chart for problem was really the best fit for me here. I could also give my chart a name. And if I want to save this and just view it, you can see now I have this really quick site that I created. If I click on boundaries information, all of that data automatically pulled through. That base map that I changed to OpenStreetMaps is right there. I can also click in to explore any of this data set. I can interact with the Twitter feed, choosing to like this tweet from the LA County Fire Department. I won't because I don't really like fires that much, but you can see how easy it was to build the site and to make it an approachable, accessible experience for end users. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brenda to show you how you can take this same capability that works so well for your internal data and the stuff that's secured behind your firewall and reach the general public.
Thanks, Shannon. Let me share my screen with you. All right, I think we're good. You can see that. So yeah, I just want to set the stage a little bit with ArcGIS Hub. ArcGIS Hub has many of the same capabilities or the same site capabilities that Shannon just showed, but it goes a little bit further. And I want to just talk about some of the concepts behind ArcGIS Hub. ArcGIS Hub starts with this kind of a smart cities, smart communities notion of, all communities want to be healthy, resilient, livable, and in this case, safe. We're kind of focused on safe today. And the way we found that this often happens is that there will be initiatives that support those higher aspirations. So maybe in terms of safety, we want to improve response times, or we have an initiative to improve earthquake preparedness, or whatever that the initiative might be. So initiatives usually involve many stakeholders, not just the organization at the center of it, but also organizations in the community and citizens and residents. So the question is, how can people, across the community be informed, be on board, participate, possibly contribute data, and align effort and resources? So how do you go beyond the four walls of the organization? And that's where the idea of initiatives comes in, and that's what the mission of ArcGIS Hub is about. It's designed to provide an easy to configure cloud platform that organizes the people, data, and engagement tools to accomplish initiative goals. So for each initiative, or you could say mission or project, ArcGIS Hub provides a framework for data sharing. So Shannon showed you in Enterprise, you can share data. You can also do that in ArcGIS Hub, and it can be open data to the public, or you can still share data privately with teams and members who have access. It's about community engagement, and ArcGIS has sites just like Enterprise does to encourage engagement. And then it also has the concepts of teams, excuse me, and tracking performance toward your initiative goals. So Shannon started with Enterprise. Often our customers will have an online environment through ArcGIS Online where they are surfacing some of the data, and ArcGIS Hub is built on top of ArcGIS Online. It sits in the online environment, and it provides open data and private data sharing, and that's available in the basic level of the subscription. It has a site building capability, which is also in the basic level of the subscription, and that basic level, license level, is included with ArcGIS Online. So if you have ArcGIS Online, you have the basic level of ArcGIS Hub, and you can start building sites today. It also provides something new with the premium level of the product, which is the ability to have community identities or logins for community members. And then there's this concept of initiatives, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail in a minute. So as I mentioned, there's the same site capability or a similar site capability in ArcGIS Hub as you saw in Enterprise, and we have clients today who are creating their sites, such as Loudoun County and the Florida Division of Emergency Management, and even the state of California has their Emergency Services Data Hub, and Georgia has a GIS hub that they use for surfacing these contents. So you can see people are starting to create their own sites. As I mentioned, what's unique about Hub is the ability to extend beyond the four walls of your organization. So with ArcGIS Hub, you can license community identities for members of the community, which means they no longer have to be anonymous. They can do things like follow your initiative or follow the content and register to be informed. They can register for events. They can sign in to access content. So it gives you a lot more capability. One of the ways we find identities to be so useful is that typically when we think of engagement or reaching out to the public, we have this simple scenario in mind, that maybe there's a group of staff who is combining their geospatial assets and information and placing it on a site with some engagement tools, and that generally reaches the anonymous community. And that's okay. That's one approach, and it's a valid approach. But wouldn't it be nice if the members of that community could say follow that initiative or subscribe to it to stay informed about what's happening? So in an emergency situation, if they were to follow it, you could push notifications to them. So initiatives, community identities allow people to do that, to say follow an initiative. It also would be nice to have identity because maybe you want them to go deeper and volunteer for things. So maybe after a disaster, you have a team of volunteers that goes out to search for others or help clean up, whatever it is. So you can have teams of volunteers, and then those people we found are actually very instrumental in reaching the hard to reach communities. So again, having identity lets you kind of extend your workforce in a way. The other thing it lets you do is invite trusted members of the community to be collaborators on initiatives. Maybe they have data you need for your initiative and you want to combine it with yours, or work together to create tools that will show up on the website, for example. And maybe there's just a group of external stakeholders that you need to share information with before it goes public. So all of that flexibility is what this new community identity will allow you to do. The other thing with ArcGIS Hub is so many of our customers have created great applications already. And we, again, have this idea, our notion of each initiative would have a site or a web page that you would place that content on to, and then that could tie to your existing website. So we also have the sites capability. But going beyond this idea of initiative, it's a little bit bigger than that. And while you might have your own content, we realize that not everybody wants to reinvent the wheel each time for common initiatives that are out there. So in ArcGIS Hub, we have packaged up initiatives in the form of ready-to-use templates that package together a beautifully designed website, and then apps and tools that you would activate and put on that website. So maybe it's surveys or crowdsourcing apps. It's all kind of in the nice little bundle that we've put together for each initiative. So with that, I will switch over and show you quickly what ArcGIS Hub looks like, or jump in right into that gallery. So now I'm signed into ArcGIS Hub, and I see I have a gallery of initiative template options. There isn't one necessarily for 911 or maybe my specific initiative. So I have the option of creating a new blank initiative, which will give me a website and some other capabilities. Or I can maybe start with one that's here. And so one of these is the Vision Zero initiative template. And you can see what I get is a nice default website packaged with each of these. And a little tip is, if you're not a designer, and even if this isn't your initiative, you can always use these website templates for your own purposes. So that's what I've done. I've gone ahead and created, taken that Vision Zero template and simply swapped out the images and started replacing the text. And then what you might see is I've done something, I've added a follow button because I want people in the community to follow this initiative. I've done other things, like I've created an upcoming event. And this is again where the premium features and those identities come in to play, because now if I click this event, it takes people to an event page where they can register for this event. So these are some of the premium capabilities and the features of that. So back to my Vision Zero or my hub, I can continue to customize this page, and when I'm ready, well, I can choose to keep it private to my organization, or when I'm ready, I can publish that out to the public. So that's just a real quick smattering of Hub. The other thing I want to mention is, again, it's not all about just the site. ArcGIS Hub is also about the people in an initiative. So here I have my public safety initiative. And if I want to add team members, I can, and I can choose to add them from my organization or, again, from the community. So if I have community members that I think should help me with this initiative, I can add them and invite them to the team. So that's it real quick. I'm going to save some time for Ken Wall. I want to pass it over to him because he has lots of great information, and thank you so much for attending today.
Thanks, Brenda. This is Ken Wall. I'm a Esri business partner, as Mike said. We work primarily in the rural parts of the country, and the last several years we've been focusing on next generation 911. So I'm going to talk a bit about the preparation and authentication of GIS data for next generation 911, and then tie it into ArcGIS Hub and the tools that are available now to rural communities that have not been available in the past. We have a story map on this. This is the URL to access it, and this is an ongoing effort to both leverage technology from Esri ourselves, but also provide tips and tricks and lessons learned and examples from around the country in rural areas that work for this, for next generation 911. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I wanted to provide a little bit of context on how the difference in how GIS fits into next generation 911 and how it differs from the current or legacy system. The current system is really decades old, and in fact, parts of the country never converted to enhanced 911. They're still using basic 911, so when a call comes into the center, the dispatcher has to work through the entire process of locating the person and figuring out how to deal with it and how to get the emergency responders to them. With the existing 911, the data is not based on GIS. It's based on computer-aided dispatch systems. It's built from old landline telephones, so the addresses and locations are stored in actually a database table rather than a map. So it's pretty revolutionary as we move through this. Some of the parts of the country have begun to implement this. It's going to be a couple of years over the next few years as this develops throughout the entire country. And it's a challenge in rural areas because every public service answering point, or typically in the rural areas, those are counties or parishes or similar types of communities are responsible for this, not the state and not the federal government. So GIS is core to this. And one of the key things is that it's interoperable. If you look down at the lower right of this slide, this is the sort of the schematic of how it works. And everything in green there shows how GIS identifies the location and then passes that information to the emergency responder to respond to it. But one thing in the lower right that's important is part of this overall architecture for next generation 911 is a piece called the additional data repository. And that's where ArcGIS Hub would fit in. In the 911 center, that's where you would store things like building footprints, dashboards, web maps, and a variety of other services. Current legacy 911 does use gateway services for things like text and mass mailings for identifying communities in the case they have to be evacuated. But those are all gateways services now. They're not integrated into the core next generation 911 framework. This issue is very problematic in rural parts of the country. These are just the counties in the US, but these represent typically the type of emergencies. Each one of these has a 911 call center, and it's a local government function to provide these. So there's more than 6,000 of them. And the new system, NextGen, is designed to be interoperable. So it's a real big sea change for 911 centers to move from everything being, they're an island, in and of themselves, to working with their neighbors. The idea of this is that if you have a hurricane on the East Coast or a wildfire in California, or in the case of Montana, we often have a dispatch center that has 2 dispatchers, and they might both have the flu at the same time. Other public service answering points, other 911 centers will be able to jump in and assist if there's an overload, if there's a hurricane. Different parts of the country could come in. All the data is similar, same standards throughout the country, and so it's interoperable, and it's a real key point. And it's a really important reason why tools like ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Hub are important to this process. These are the required layers, and the road center lines and site structure points are the bedrock layers that are used in rural parts of the country as well as in urban. They really are some of the most important layers forming the foundation for GIS for any community. And added to this are the emergency service boundaries. The big change in this with NextGen is that when you are when you're out fishing on a lake, or you're hiking in the mountains, or on a highway, interstate highway, anywhere, that location will be fed into the 911 center almost instantaneously, and it'll be a point on polygon overlay to determine which provider or which emergency responder, medical service, fire, law enforcement, or others like poison control, highway patrol, et cetera, respond to that particular location. So it's a much more specific, and will make things much more efficient as we respond to 911 in the future. Our clients working in rural areas don't have the budgets to really maintain and support large-scale enterprise systems. But the beauty of this, as Brenda said, is that this technology is available even with basic subscriptions. So a very low price point for rural folks to get into and use this. As I said earlier, it's a real sea change in this, in that a tiny county like the one I'm going to be illustrating here, Teton County in Montana, has the ability to leverage technology that were formerly only available to large cities like Los Angeles or Philadelphia or New York. So it really levels the playing field and enables the rural governments to get into the game and work with the data. The cool thing about it too is that they can create maps and applications. They can leverage the mobile tools that are out there, both to generate their next generation 911 data and prepare it, but also for everyday work. So they're really able to use this data to build on not only the public safety 911 information, but apply that to additional parts of how they work within their communities. So it's a real advantage to the rural communities to be able to do this, and it's almost essential for them to work with the 911 data as they prepare it. I'm going to show a few examples from Teton County, Montana. This is a rural county in the middle of on the Rocky Mountain front in Montana. Probably has the distinction of being one of the only places that has had 911 calls from grizzly bears wandering into town. They used to be native to the prairies. They now live in the mountains, but it's a pretty amazing country. And I want to give a thanks to Paul Wick, the planner and GIS coordinator, and typical of a lot of rural GIS folks. He wears a lot of hats, and a lot of people in rural Montana and throughout the country wear a lot of hats, and so they aren't typically very much experts in GIS, but the technology allows them to apply this to their everyday work. And the main things that it helps is to save them time, and in the case of next generation 911, to collaborate with their partners. This small community, or this county, has about 6,000 people and about 3,000 housing units. And just as an example, I was talking with Paul yesterday, and the Montana Department of Commerce contacted him. They're trying to upgrade their address database in their cadastral parcel, which we have throughout the state. And he would have had to spend hours with them, but he maintains his next generation data, his structures, his roads in ArcGIS Online. It's always in real time and available. It's a work in progress as he's improving the data and getting it ready for next gen. But he just pointed them to the site, and they're able to do everything with his web maps. Saves him a ton of time, which he also has planning duties, and he has other duties as assigned. So it's a great time saver for him. It also allows him to collaborate with his neighbors, which is critical in the next generation data preparation. You can see here that you don't have all the premium features with Hub when you just have a basic license, but their website is maintained by a third party. I think that's true in a lot of rural areas. They're not website experts or experts on social media. So he's able to basically showcase his applications from floodplain mapping to public safety and allow his data to be exposed to be used by the neighbors as well as in other ways. It's pretty exciting. When we first started in Teton County, they were a little bit reluctant to publish their data online. They weren't really that comfortable with their website is fairly static, but we basically talked to them and convinced them that it's a good idea to do it, and they've been, I think, pleased with the results. They actually are very transparent with their data. Their data's out there in draft form as they work through it, but it's live online. They work on ArcGIS Online, and have control over editing the data. That's only done by Paul and his authorized technicians, but they share this in a variety of applications that are used by the sheriff, by the title companies, by the conservation groups that work in the area, and many more. I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the tips and tricks that we found and tie this back into ArcGIS Hub as well in terms of how this works when you actually start to prepare your data. So a lot of the work involved with getting ready for NextGen is matching up your GIS data, and some counties start from scratch. They don't have GIS data, which they still can participate in this process and leverage this technology. Many of the counties, in terms of Next Generation 911 or 911 in general, have hired an outside consultant. And so they update this maybe once a year, or and they rely on others to provide the GIS, but it requires a tremendous amount of local knowledge as you compare your GIS roads and structures to the older data, the IMSAG tabular data that's running 911 right now. You have to make a lot of decisions locally about road names, about which address is correct. So we've developed a bunch of tools working with these counties, and they're leveraging out-of-the-box ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro technology for this. Many of them can't afford the way the market's going today is many of the dedicated 911 consultants out there are providing subscription services at a monthly rate. These counties just don't have the tax base to support this, and so we found that it can be very successfully done with out-of-the-box technology from Esri that many of them already have in place, and they could leverage it for other things. Creating and editing is a key part of this. That's where a lot of the work is involved, in editing your roads and structures and making sure that everything's there and everything is 100%. There's some discussions in the 911 world and from various documents from NENA, the data model, and the folks that provide standards for 911, that you want to achieve 98% accuracy, but it's really important that you try to achieve 100% accuracy. Public safety is too important, and lives depend on it. So a lot of work goes into this, and we've been leveraging tools and other data sets. Microsoft released a national building footprint layer that's quite accurate in rural areas, and that allows you to identify your structures. In our state, most of the rural counties had not identified the actual structure location of a house or a business. They had the address where their private road or driveway hit the main road that was addressed, and that can be 15, 20 miles away. So it really helps in getting the responders to the right location, or a life flight helicopter to the right location. It's also important that these rural governments work closely with telecommunications providers. Right now, 911 is validated by the telephone company records, mailing records. And that's changing, and they're working on federal grants from the SEC and others, working into rural areas and getting subsidies to do that. So your telcos can be a really important partner in this process. Most states have a roll-up process where they do the quality control and checking and make sure everything matches along the boundary at the state level, but some states don't have that capability set up, including our state. So every county is sort of on its own in order to make this thing work. Here's a quick example from the corner of Montana South. This is the southeast corner of Montana. Here we've got Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming coming together. And we had to work closely with North Dakota or in the process of that with Wyoming and South Dakota, because the border line here, people use different lines for that. And there was a several 100-foot gap in parts of it, and ranches and farms were in that gap. And we can't let that happen with NextGen. We got to respond to everybody. So a lot of people don't realize how much collaboration is involved, but you got to work with each of your neighbors one-on-one and identify where every road crosses, make sure you're snappy to the same road points. And so ArcGIS Hub, where your data is published, allows all your partners to download your data at any point, check against theirs, and get on a common footing. And then lastly, publishing and maintaining the data. This is the hub that Teton County relies on, and they continue to build on this. They've got applications that their citizens could use on smartphones and tablets in an offline capacity, which is really important in rural areas where we have cell phone towers that are scattered a long ways. A lot of Montana, you can't get a cell phone signal. So it's important to leverage this technology and go out. It's very popular. In the counties we work with, all the sheriff deputies and the ambulances have paper map books, but they also have a backup iPad in their truck that has online maps that are in offline mode. allowing them to provide services for their constituents. So I'm going to pass this back to Britt now for a little bit of discussion on licensing.
Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time presenting to all the attendees today. So I would like to just share a few comments as we wrap up today's webinar. And first of all, before I get to the licensing from Esri, I really want to say a second or third thank you to our presenters today. From Esri, we had Shannon and Brenda, and thank you so much for talking about ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Hub, and then a special thanks to Ken Wall from Geodata Services. It's really great to see what you've done, and how in general what you have done, regardless of the size of the agencies that you support, whether they're rural or large. What you've done is outstanding, and I know that your good work as a partner is done with all the attention that you spent to our technology, but also it helps that you've got a great partner manager in Monique Allen, who is somebody who has been working with you for a number of years now. So I think it's great that you're working and continue to work with your partner manager to get the best out of our technology. So today in the webinar, you've heard again about Enterprise, you've heard about ArcGIS Hub, and I think there's a couple of important things for takeaways here. One is that, many people probably have ArcGIS Enterprise, and most everybody on this call probably have ArcGIS Online. So the thing to keep in mind is that go out and give it a test drive. Play with ArcGIS Online and the capabilities that Hub are available to you today. We do have some special licensings out there, enterprise agreements for public safety, and we definitely want to talk to you about, if that's a good fit for you, and if you think that's something you want to explore, you'll see Mike King's email on a upcoming slide. You can reach out to us. If you don't know your account manager, please reach out to us, and we'll definitely follow up you on that. And then for those who might want to explore those premium capabilities of ArcGIS Hub, that's something that is done more of on an additional annual fee, and it's priced based on the size of your community. And again, we can help you understand what that is, what it means to move to that premium aspects of ArcGIS Hub, and if it's right for your agency or your city or county. So there was a few questions during the webinar, and we will follow up on those questions as a follow-up to this webinar. But there was one thing that came through as regarding to, it was actually an interesting question about how Esri support of NINA GIS standards with their geocoding services. And I guess really wanted to mention on that one is Esri has a new geocoder that's more supportive of the NINA standards. And so I really recommend for those who might be using older geocoding services or capabilities that they look to some of the newer capabilities from Esri on the geocoding front. So again, for those who are kind of seeing how Esri supports those standards from a geocoding perspective, please follow up on that item as well. Again, there was a lot of great information on the webinar today, and for those who probably are maybe trying to put their head wrapped around this and what was shared and how they can take advantage of some of these things, this webinar is going to be recorded, and it will be posted on the Esri.com website, and all the attendees will get that information following. So in wrap up, I guess the last thing I would like to say, I thank everybody who attended today's webinar. It's great that we have great attendees for these webinars, and we will continue providing more webinars throughout the year, and they'll be posted on our public safety website, and we'll be providing that information to everybody as well. So as on behalf of myself and the rest of the public safety team, thank you everyone for joining today.
And if I could just add one thing, Britt, on the final contact slide, which should be coming up now, there also is a link for you to hit the QR code and download the free ebook, which is supportive of the 5 ways GIS is empowering next generation 911. And again, for everybody, and to echo what Britt has said, thank you so much for attending. We'll see you in July, and please keep in mind our National Security Summit prior to the Esri User Conference in San Diego in July. and the Esri International User Conference, where you can join 18,000 plus of your closest GIS friends and figure out how to solve problems. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks to the Esri team and to Ken. Thank you.